Well, hello, my name's Louise Savage of Louise Savage Muses. Welcome to my channel if you've not visited before, and welcome back if you have. So today has been a very, very important and special day in my calendar, my annual calendar, because the Women's Prize for Fiction shortlist has been announced, and I'm here to share with you my reaction to those choices. I've had a very, very brief conversation with Simon, my son, of Savage Reads fame, about it, but we haven't discussed it at any great length, so I'm not going to share. I'm sure he'll be posting his views on the subject as well. Anyway, without further ado, so first up is The Bread the Devil Knead by Lisa Allen-Agostini. This was one that I picked as one of my choices for the shortlist. So I'm delighted that it's been successful and it's there. It's the story. It's a story set in Trinidad and in the port of Spain. And Althea, I think her name is Alethea, is a young woman. Well, I say young woman, she's young to me. She's just turning 40, I think. And she works in a boutique. She's very successful at her job. But the sort of, what's the word? The spark, I suppose, for the novel is the fact that she is in an extremely abusive relationship. So although she appears very well turned out, very confident in what she does, when underneath those clothes are the bruises and marks and scars of somebody who has been mistreated by her partner, and she witnesses the murder of a woman by an abusive partner herself, and that sort of triggers the sort of thrust of the novel. So I loved the liveliness of the writing. I thought that the dialogue was excellent, and it's a real page turner. And despite the fact that it deals with some very devastating subject matter, there's a almost upbeat tone to it. And what I didn't realise until recently was that the writer Lisa, oh gosh, I'm terrible with names, Allen-Agostini, she is a comedian. And I think that kind of shines through in her writing. So I'm absolutely thrilled to see this on the shortlist. You can still see the big yes on the back from when Simon and I recorded our long list choices. Next up is The Sentence by Louise Erdrich. And I didn't select this as one of my personal choices, but I can fully understand why it's been chosen. I haven't yet finished reading it. I kind of stalled with it a little bit. There are aspects of it that I really, really enjoyed. So, or should say am enjoying, because I haven't finished it. So there's a very sort of startling incident, very dramatic incident at the beginning of this novel, which leads to the incarceration of the protagonist. And when she's released from jail, where she sort of reads voraciously to get herself through the sentence of the title, I suppose, she ends up working in a bookshop, but the bookshop is haunted by the ghost of a very, very irritating customer. And, you know, I suppose for me, I'm not always particularly keen on novels that focus on the supernatural or ghosts or things like that. But I did think that there's a plausibility here. And the reason I stopped reading it was because the pace of the novel changed, and also because I was reading the long list under quite a lot of pressure, time pressure. So I wanted to do the book justice. So I'm really looking forward. I'm glad it's been selected because I want to read, you know, the rest of the novel. The other thing I loved about this book was the focus on the sort of Native American people as well, and you know, their kind of spirituality, which is very evident in this novel too. So yeah, an unsurprising choice in many ways, and it's made me, you know, I'm intrigued to read some of her other novels. I've not read The Night Watch, which I know was extremely successful. So yeah, again, another interesting choice. Next up is Sorrow and Bliss by Meg Mason, which I know has been a great favourite, very popular, particularly I suspect with the sort of 40-ish age group. It's a novel about mental instability, I suppose, about a woman who appears to be, at the age of 17, she appears to have this massive sort of meltdown, breakdown, and it completely blights her life. She has a devoted husband called Patrick who stands by her year after year after year, even though sometimes she can't get out of bed, she can't function very often in a inverted commas normal way. Her illness affects her ability / decision to not have children, and yet her sister gives birth to boy after boy after boy. So the relationship between her and her sister is really interesting and very rich. Her sister's quite foul-mouthed and not shy to say what she thinks. There's also a wider family. And one of the reasons that I didn't personally select this originally was because I found the wider family a bit difficult to get my head around. I didn't quite recognise them, but nevertheless, I think this is an extremely important novel because it testifies to the huge importance of diagnosis when it comes to any sort of psychological or physical illness, something that I know only too well through the experience that my younger son had. So yeah, I think this is a very, very important novel and a great choice even though it wasn't one of my choices, I think, and it was one that Simon chose. I think it's a good choice for the shortlist. Next on to Ruth Ozeki's book of Form and Emptiness. I am so pleased that this is on the shortlist because, again, even though I didn't shortlist it myself, I feel like I read it at the wrong time. In fact, I say read it, I didn't read it, I read some of it. So it's a book about grief. It's a book about the way that the death of a husband and father affects the wife and son. I think the boy's called Benny, I can't quite remember. And he, as a result of about a year after I think his father's death, he starts to have all these strange sort of experiences, voices, etc., etc. And so it's a novel about grief. Again, at the time I struggled because there is a book that has a voice in the novel, and when I was reading it, I felt it was a bit too self-conscious and it was jerking me out of the narrative. But again, as I've just said, I'm really pleased that this will now pressure me in a good way into giving this book the justice I imagine it deserves. So I'm looking forward to getting my teeth stuck properly into this. The penultimate book of the 6 is Elif Shafak's Island of Missing Trees. This is a novel that I thoroughly enjoyed and did select my personal shortlist. It's still got the big yes sticker on the back as well. I loved this. I'm a very keen gardener. I love anything to do with trees, nature, etc., etc. And the fact that there is a talking fig tree in this, the fig tree in this book that speaks is so plausible that you barely notice it. And Elif Shafak's style in this novel is very much that of a kind of old-fashioned fable. You've got that sort of background. I can't remember how it starts now, but I know there's I haven't got my glasses on, so I won't be able to read it. Yeah, once upon a memory at the far end of the Mediterranean Sea. It's got that kind of almost fairy tale sort of opening to it. So the fact that the tree has a voice is sort of plausible because of that, and you just don't notice it. The young protagonist Ada, she's a young girl. She's really struggling. Her mother has died. Her mother was Turkish. Her father is Greek. So it explores their relationship, and the novel really is Ada uncovering her parents' background, which takes us back to Cyprus in the 1970s and the conflict there. There are some fabulous relationships in this novel. There's a gay couple who can't be openly gay, who I ended up having such an affection for, and the way that their lives are related is so empathetic and so beautiful. I love the message of this novel, the idea that she keeps saying that we're all islanders. It doesn't matter, the idea of whether you're Greek or you're Turkish, or we're all just islanders. We're all just human beings, and she makes that message really strongly and beautifully without it being remotely preachy. Elif Shafak for me is such a voice of sanity in a very topsy-turvy world. I really do admire her as a writer, so absolutely delighted that she's featured on the list. And finally, Great Circle by Maggie Shipstead, which was the first of these novels that I read, I think. And again, I selected this for my personal shortlist because I love historical fiction. It's set in the 1950s mainly, and tells the story of Marion Graves, I think she's called. And she is a young woman living in the back of beyond, and she has this dream to fly planes and to circumnavigate the globe in her aircraft. And I just love the vim and vigour and lack of convention that this woman represents. She's a female at her best at a time when that was difficult. And what's interesting is that she's a really strong woman, but all the time her life is kind of dependent on the men around her, the man she marries, her father, her brother, and how that sort of colours her existence. There's a second layer to the novel because there's a young Hollywood film star who is playing the part of Marion in contemporary LA, and she becomes really interested, obviously because she's playing the character. She becomes very interested in Marion's life, and I thought the voice of the Hollywood actor was absolutely brilliant. She and Marion are so different, and yet their worlds collide in a way that I found fascinating. So I have a really strong affection for this novel. The scenes from it, the sort of, some novels are really cinematic, and I would describe this, it would make a brilliant film. It's a really cinematic novel. The images of the land that she flies over and some of the flights she makes, and particularly the final chapters of the novel, I don't think will ever leave me. So it's got huge scope. So there we are. That's The Great Circle by Maggie Shipstead. And what an amazing 6 novels. And, there's a little tear in my eye for the novels that didn't get through, particularly this one, Sky Day, I think, because I've got it down here. This was a big yes from me. And I could have seen this actually as a winner by Leonie Ross, because I think it's a very important book in terms of how we view the female body and the female anatomy, particularly. I mean, it's a joyous book. It's a riot of a read. But one of the things it does is it tackles completely, totally unapologetically, in a way that I have never read before, the sort of the way we ought to be seeing the female anatomy as something beautiful rather than something that we need to hide or be ashamed of or whatever it might be. So, you know, in terms of the Women's Prize for Fiction, I have to be really honest and say that this is the one that I'm really disappointed didn't make the shortlist. But there you go, it's a prize, and we all have different perspectives, and that's what makes reading so wonderful, is the opportunity to discuss our attitudes and to think about the way that novels, you know, we all react so differently, and we each bring our own voice to any novel that we read. Anyway, there we go. That's my reflections on the Women's Prize shortlist. So now it'll be a case of counting down to the long list announcements later this year. Anyway, do take care. Really glad you joined me. Love to know what your thoughts are and your reactions are to the shortlist. Take care. Bye.